Thanks for tuning in to another webinar. This month we're talking about human errors, traps, and precursors. So I'm Emily Pritt and I'm here with Mark Paradies, and we're going to talk about exactly what all that is.
All right.
Yeah. So there's an article that you've written that talks about this
Human
topic.
error, traps, and precursors.
Yeah.
And this really is information that comes out of our 2-day Stopping Human Error course. And what we've put into that course are all the different techniques that people use to try to improve human performance. And human error, traps, and precursors is one of those. Mm-hmm. So I guess the first thing we should go over is what are human error, traps, and precursors. So we're going to put 2 slides up here, and I'm going to just quickly go through these. And, well, let me just go through them and then I'll talk about them.
Okay.
So the first, these are things that are error traps or precursors to errors. And the idea is you are going to train somebody on these so that they can recognize them and know they're just about to step into a trap. Things that precede a mistake that could lead to an accident. You're in a hurry or feeling time pressure. Overworked, high workload. Push to get things done, go on vacation or a holiday. Multitasking, simultaneous tasks. Had a major event, lost a loved one, hospitalized child, separated from a spouse, etc., etc., etc. Stressed, having a bad day, bored, drowsy, monotonous tasks. Sick or fatigued, interrupted. Work to be performed is unclear. If you have a guess at something, you're making your own interpretation of something. If you have to guess. Aren't sure what the desired outcome is. No standards or unclear standards. Non-routine work. Unfamiliar work. First time. Inexperienced. Confusing displays or controls. Non-standard controls or displays. Must use workarounds, can't see the results of your actions, unexpected conditions, personality conflicts, doing work from habit, automatic work, can't remember exact communications, excessive communications required, didn't quite hear everything said, assume work is just like other tasks, you took a shortcut, too many things to remember, first task after a long time off, last thing to do in the day. That's the first page of them. There's more. Delayed work, things taking too long, work fatigue, bad weather, rain, snow, hot, cold, windy, high vibrations, always done it this way, poor access to work, bad equipment layout, need tools, parts not available, tools, equipment in bad condition, multiple similar equipment facilities or controls, nuisance alarms, disabled alarms or warning systems, loud work environment, complexity, just after waking up or after a meal.
Okay.
Now that's the list. Now, I'm going to train you to recognize those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, human error is preventable.
And therefore, you're going to self-monitor your own performance. Mm-hmm. And when you see one of these, you're going to do what?
Stop and redirect myself.
Stop, that's good. You're going to stop and you're going to say, hey, I'm about to step into a trap. Mm. There should be something I can do to make myself be more careful in the next few minutes or hours or however long it takes to do whatever this task is, wherever one of these things are causing a problem.
Yeah, all those things, sure. Mm-hmm.
Any of those. Now, I like to look at this list and say, holy cow, one of these things are almost always in play, right?
Exactly.
I mean, it says here, push to get things done. Isn't there always a push to get things done. Mm-hmm. So maybe they mean abnormal push to get things done. What's abnormal? You're going to have to judge that on the fly. One thing that's for sure is after an accident, you're always going to be able to come back and find one or more of these that you can say, see, there was a human error trap or precursor. So the first question you got to ask is, how good do you think you can be in training people to self-monitor and recognize this list on the fly?
Not good, because we're already distracted as is.
Actually, you're actually adding an additional task to the task they always have to do, because you not only have to do whatever work you're doing, but you got to monitor yourself while you're doing it. And this is all self-monitoring, and that depends on somebody being really self-aware. And boy, that's a tough, that people aren't really good at that, if that's the way I like to put it. So at any rate, there's then about 5 or 6, and we'll put a slide in here with what they are, what they're called, things that people can do, things like STAR, stop, think, act, review.
Right.
There's other things you can do, have a questioning attitude, all these things you can apply to make sure these things aren't going to cause you to step into a trap or have a precursor to an accident. Now, the first question is, how good are you at detecting this? Then the second question is, how good are you at picking out the right
tool or technique? Yeah.
And how effective is that tool to avoiding the trap? See, I always think, let's see, what's one of the ones on here I was thinking about? I was thinking about the one with the non-standard controls or displays, or even the confusing displays or controls. Now, I look at that as a chance to fix the problem.
Right.
We could make them so they're not confusing, or so they're not non-standard.
Right.
And that would make it so that you don't have to remember, when I get here and I get to this confusing control, I've got to apply this strategy to make it less bad.
You just got to improve the workplace design.
Exactly.
Something like
Or the other one, another good one in here, there's one about a workplace being too small or too hard to get into or hard to work at. Well, then maybe you want to change. Maybe what they should have done, design the workplace so that you didn't have to crawl into a small hole to do the work or whatever it is. Poor access to work, bad equipment layout. Maybe they should have laid it out so it isn't bad. So the hard part about some of these is the shortcut is to make the human responsible for fixing mistakes in the design of the plant. And it's a lot, quote unquote, cheaper to make the human responsible, but it's a lot less effective to do that rather than to fix the problem where it exists. So that's another one of these about, this is sort of tacking on, by the way, you're responsible for catching your own, for realizing, this is a bad situation, I'm going to fix it every time I do it.
So I read that article and my brain started to pick apart, traps and precursors. How do I distinguish between those?
I don't know. A trap is a precursor. Maybe they're the same.
So I got some definition. I'm going to run this by.
All right.
Okay. So traps are conditions that catch someone off guard. They're external factors, conditions, environments. And so some ways to mitigate. So
some of those fit in here.
Yeah, to mitigate traps, it would be to improve the workplace design, reduce noise or distraction, simplify processes, have proper lighting or ergonomics.
None of those are in here as things you do for these.
No. And then precursors are conditions or states of an individual that indicate increased risk of error. They're internal factors or warning signs. And precursors to mitigate that is adequate rest, manage workload, stress management, training,
and
culture.
you can see where those are. So maybe half of these are precursors and half of them are traps. And I don't know if I need to teach you which is which.
No, because they're all going to happen.
Because they're all things that are bad.
And they're all part of human error.
Right. So I agree. And once again, let's see, what would be better? to have you recognize you're having a bad day.
Mm-hmm.
Can I make it so I never have a bad day?
That's a little mindset.
And by the way, after an accident, isn't that day always a bad day? If you have a big accident, you're never gonna say, "Oh, this was a really great day." That wasn't a trap. No, it's always going to be a bad day, and you're going to look back at it and say, "Oh, that was really a bad day." So I'm not sure stressed. Well, if you weren't stressed before the accident, you're certainly going to be stressed after the accident. But can you relieve all stress?
No.
Oh.
And there's good stress. Good stress motivates you because you have a deadline, because there's that push to get things finished on time. So
you could say like sick or fatigued. Okay, you always need to get a good night's rest, and you never should come to work sick. Well,
depending on what industry, what your job is, sometimes you
just have to.
Exactly.
If you're driving back someplace, you're a truck driver, and midway in the drive you start feeling sick. Well, it's pretty hard just to pull over and say, I quit, leave the truck here. I'm not gonna make the rest of the trip home.
So I'm not a truck driver, but if I was gonna leave right now and drive to Florida, which is 12 to 14 hours from now, I know that there's gonna be a certain point that I'm gonna get tired, and for me to drive straight through, that's the precursor.
You shouldn't plan that, right?
No.
So that's one example where you could have alternate drivers, switch on and off, plan where you're going to stay overnight so you don't drive all the way through. There's some things you can do. So, but once again, you don't detect that while you're doing the work, probably.
No.
That's almost pre-planning.
Exactly. Yeah.
If you're halfway to Florida and you go, I didn't really count on this taking 14 hours for me to drive. I thought I'd get here in 45 minutes.
But I think in work, people do that. They're in the middle of that task, and they don't, or whatever they're doing, and they don't go, "Oh, wait a minute, I should have pre-planned this." Then they're like, "Oh, I got to be done by this time," and they push through, and then
let's see, they're hurrying or feeling time pressure. And maybe that's because they're overworked.
Yeah.
Now, all those things are true, but boy, it's hard to. So I've got lots of examples. I remember one it was getting toward the end of shift, and they were greasing these valves, and what they decided to do is they greased a bunch of them. So they decided to split up. The trainee would go grease the last one over here, and the qualified guy would go grease the last one over here. And the qualified guy had been watching the trainee do the greasing on these other ones, and it had all worked, but the trainee goofed up when he went off to do the last one. And they were in a hurry, that's why they split up. And it was getting to be the end of shift, so they wanted to get things done.
Yeah.
And, you could say, "Ooh, you shouldn't have done that." But if it turned out the valve he sent him to was different than the ones he'd been doing, and he didn't recognize the difference and greased the wrong thing. So, it's one of those, if the guy had been there, he knew that was different. He didn't think of it being different before he sent the trainee off to do it. But he would have recognized it and say, "Oh, wait, we don't grease that. We grease this over here on this one." Nonetheless, didn't happen. They were under time pressure. Let's see, there's another one in here about breaking a rule. Taking a shortcut, I think it said. Take a shortcut. Well, that was a shortcut to split up, to get two done in the time it takes to do one. There you go. It was a precursor in that case, or was it a trap? Either one. But you could go through examples of these all day long, and afterwards it's very clear. Well, and the way these work then is usually it turns out it's almost like a blame thing. You didn't recognize the error. You didn't recognize the error trap, or you didn't recognize the precursor. Therefore, you didn't do what you should have done, rather than maybe we shouldn't have given you all this work to do at the end of shift. Or, if worst came to worst, two things. You authorize 30 minutes of overtime for him to get that last one done, or you turn over the last 2 degrees to the next shift. But for some reason, that didn't seem like a a doable thing to those two guys who were trying to finish it up there at the end of the day.
So it sounds like sometimes in some investigations, people can be quick to point to the human error to blame it on that individual instead of looking at the bigger picture to see if we keep having the same mistake over and over again, maybe there's more to it. Maybe it is in our design, looking at.
If we have, let's see, what's the one in here? Confusing displays or controls.
Yeah.
Well, obviously we should fix this one, but if we've got a bunch of confusing displays and controls, that's a whole design issue, right? A whole design problem. And training people to recognize they're confusing and then try to use some technique to be more reliable, like star, is probably not the best of ideas. It'd be much better if you redid the controls or redid the display so they weren't confusing.
So stopping human error course is one of the things that you spoke about when you were mentioning star and having questioning attitude. So that's definitely something recommended for people to take the course where you can learn all these different techniques.
Sure, and if you check our website, you can see when the most next reasonable one for you to go to is going to be. We probably have them about once every 6 months, maybe a little longer than that. So it isn't like we have them every other week like we do 2-day courses. But it is a course we occasionally have. And I've had people tell me it'll change the way you think about human error.
Yeah.
Rather than blaming people, you'll start seeing ways that you can change the work environment, change the way you do things that'll actually increase human reliability, or maybe in some cases completely stop a particular type of human error so that it doesn't happen again. Ever, period.
I've taken the course twice and learned something new each time. Any course that I take with TapRooT, that I take another course, I'm like, I never thought of that or that or that. But to see our courses, you go to taproot.com and click on courses.
Yep. There's one more thing.
Okay.
We have a summit about once every 18 months, and there's a human performance track in that summit, and we try to develop topics that are sort of cutting edge on ways to improve human performance, and that'll bring in additional things that goes even beyond what's in the Stopping Human Error course. So if somebody's interested in the summit, they could look that up on the website too.
Yep, and we have a whole summit page that talks about all the different tracks that we have and the locations, so definitely a good resource. We'll put that in the links below as well.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, we've talked a little bit about those human error traps and precursors. We also talked about a blog article, so we're going to put that in the links as well so you can read that. So thanks for talking today. Hopefully you guys have learned something about precursors, error traps, and ways to stop human error.